In this video, we are going to be talking about Alfred Hitchcock's Dial M for Murder from 1954, which stars Ray Milland and Grace Kelly. And my guest today is Joel Guns, who is known as the Alfred Hitchcock Geek and upcoming co-host of the HitchCon, the Hitch Conference, which will all be online from October 1st to the 3rd. The link is in the description box below for tickets and details there. Joel, thanks again for coming on to talk about this Hitchcock classic in my eyes.
Thanks. And hey, before I forget, we've got a coupon code just for your viewers.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. But feel free to share this out. It's if you go to the site, it'll send you over to the Eventbrite site where you can buy tickets and get 10% off the already cheap tickets. 10% off, and the code is HitchCon10.
Oh, well, thank you for that. Yeah, that's great. I'll put that in the description box as well. But I really appreciate that. That's really exciting. I mean, the whole thing is $25 for the whole 3 days. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's already cheap. We're just, just to cover expenses, really. So then why not sweeten the deal even more?
That's fantastic. So today, we're talking about Dial M for Murder, which is, again, a film that I have always really loved. And I'm really curious, Joel, how do you feel about this one?
This is one of my favorite movies. And in fact, it's a crowd pleaser. Like, nobody doesn't like Dial M for Murder. And and I think the only negative thing that people can say about it is that it hasn't. People assume that it's just a light, fluffy, puff piece murder mystery kind of thing, and there's just so much more going on there. A classic for two reasons: classic Hitchcock, just vintage Hitchcock, and then secondly, one of the best, in fact, I would argue, the best 3D film ever made.
You know, it's funny. I never even knew this was a 3D film until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I never knew that. I had seen it only, of course, in 2D. I guess you'd have to have seen it in the theaters in 1954. But this was a film that he was not really enthusiastic about even doing. I believe he was under contract and had to do it. And as he said in Hitchcock Truffaut, of course, I have the book behind me here, that basically it really didn't interest him. And it was sort of going back on what he knew would work. As he said to Truffaut, anytime he got nervous about a project, he would fall back on what he knew what would work with the audience. And to me, this is a classic Hitchcock sense. Yep. So I'm not really sure what didn't interest him. The only thing I can think of is maybe because it didn't have the technical challenges he would have preferred. He seemed to feel that anyone could have shot this. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I can't, there's the old saying, trust the art, not the artist. And, and I think, maybe he felt that way. He did say that he phoned the performance in, but I think he was just using that as an excuse to make a joke. You know how it is when you're an artist and you're an accomplished artist. Sometimes you show up with your A game and you crush it. Other times you show up and one can have such a lax attitude that all of a sudden things can come out that they didn't really plan on. And they can deliver a performance that's classic and timeless. And I think there are two things. One of the issues with Dial M is, yes, he had to make it on a very quick turn. So normally it was adapted from a play by Frederick Knott, and his normal process was to take a play or source material, then take it apart, blow it up, put it back together again his way, and then shoot it. In this case, he more or less worked straight from the play. So he couldn't do the usual touches. But again, the area where he really shined was in the 3D technique. But even with that, he was frustrated because there were all kinds of things that he wanted to do, but that he couldn't do because the cameras were just ginormous, and he couldn't set up a shot. He couldn't do the close-ups that he wanted. And so as an artist, you can imagine that he was frustrated.
Right.
And that he probably forgot about some of the wonderful things that he did. That inner critic kind of silenced that, perhaps.
were there some things that he has said over the years specifically that he couldn't do because of the 3D?
I don't know.
Or was he kind of general about that?
He was kind of general about that. But we do know that some of the things that he did do, he had to do these amazing cheats. So there's the famous close-up of the giant index finger.
Yeah.
Penetrating.
That's what I have on my shirt here, my Hitch with the M.
Yes.
I love that.
and so that was a trick shot, and he had a giant phone built that was like maybe 5-6 feet wide.
Yeah.
Giant 1.5 foot wide finger carved out of wood, because that was the only way he could do that. Well, if he wanted to get a great close up of Grace Kelly's face, he couldn't quite, he couldn't pull that same kind of trick off. So.
Yeah, well, it's hard to believe that that's like a foam finger. Like I couldn't tell that was some kind of big plastic finger. I'd have to go and look back because it looked totally realistic when it goes to the M, which again is
motion, and it's still pretty impressive.
Yeah,
like, frame by frame, and it's like,
yeah. Cool. What I really admire about the film is that we have a handful of actors in one location most of the time. And the story and the drama is really pushed forward because this plan from Ray Milland to kill his wife is so detailed. It is so calculated. And then, of course, when that doesn't go well the way he planned, and Grace Kelly kills the guy that Ray Milland blackmailed into doing it, the cover-up is then also, it's so detailed, it's so plot heavy to make it look like she did this intentionally and that she was lying that it was self-defense. And then even the way the inspector, puts it all together in the end. I mean, you and I would probably be here for hours if we literally went through every single detail, but it's so engaging. It's so interesting. And I can watch it again and again, and I always find things that I didn't get to. It's really, to me, is impossible. You'll get the gist of what happens in one sitting, but you've got to go back to really get all the points of views of every characters and what they knew and what they didn't know and how they plotted everything together. Has that been your experience with this one?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've seen it over and over and over and over again. And actually, it came to this is probably 20 years ago now. It came to a local theater in 3D on film. And
wow! So you did see it on 3D?
Yeah, and
oh my God.
I watched, and I decided it was going to be there for a week, and so I saw every showing for a week. And after like the third, fourth night, the doorman just started letting me in for free because. But so I tried to track that key because the key is the MacGuffin, right? And
yeah.
I had to track the key all the way through, and I just lost it. There's no, and some commentators have said, yeah, that ultimately it's kind of a red herring because it doesn't track perfectly. Like, we just have to trust that the inspector figured it out.
I found this really interesting in reading the book Hitchcock True Foe, about how people would often criticize Hitchcock's work for having scenarios or situations that were not plausible. And his stance on that was that if I can make you believe it's possible, then that's drama. It's the essence of what's going on. It's the emotions. It's not about some kind of thing that is realistic. In that case, yeah, it's another coincidence because the inspector didn't even intend to find anything out about that key. That was just a pure accident, as he was trying to figure out why he was spending all this money around town. Yeah. And again, that's the tongue-in-cheek humor. And he was trying to break into his place. And why does this key not work? And then from there, it is sort of far-fetched that he would have been able to have put that together so quickly. But I only started to, again, for me, I have to really sit and think about it to such an extent to see the holes in it. But if you don't look, I don't think anyone would. I never, on my first viewing or my second viewing, ever doubted that this wasn't possible.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think that's the thing. It's like it's almost like a house fly that, it's here and then it's there and then it's there. And you kind of lose track of the logic of where the fly is, but it's there,
Oh, exactly.
And, so
exactly.
And there's so much other stuff going on that, but I think that, like, one of the interesting, just from a construction standpoint, one thing that I really like about the film is that, yes, like, everything hinges on the location of the key. Is it in her purse? Is it in a pocket? Is it under the robe? And it's very, very mechanical, like you pointed out. And that ties in with all these mechanics of the plot, that it's a perfect murder, which is a machine-like premise to make, and so we get, then when it's time for the climax of the film, and we get the close-up of the phone, and then we get the close-up of all the circuits notching into place, in the telephone exchange, and then the phone ringing. And I see all of that as a sort of kind of a metatextual, metaphor for the construction of this particular movie itself, that was so sort of weighed down by the technology and technological considerations of making a 3D movie, and that even like the audience itself has to can't sit there passively, but they have to participate in the technology by wearing the 3D glasses, right? So
you can't just sit back because it is so detailed. It reminded me, although this movie I felt was even more all over the place. Oh God.
Knives Out.
That's the one. Yeah, I don't know if you saw that movie, but that one is so, it weaves and ends. It is so confusing. Again, you get the gist of it, but it was a little too confusing too often for my taste. But it had those similar elements of a writer who can whip these dramas and murder mysteries up, which the man that Grace Kelly is having an affair with. Of course, he's a murder mystery writer. And I love later on when he comes back and is like, okay, I've got it. Let's go to the police and say that you did it. And I bet you, and it was and he figured out exactly what this guy did, what Ray Milland did, even though he thought it was a total fiction to get Grace Kelly off. And then the irony is, again, classic Hitchcock with irony, it was all true.
Yeah.
You can't help but laugh. And I like how earlier he covered his tracks a bit by making it seem like there's no way he could come up with that. He's like, how do you write these stories? And I put myself in the killer's point of view. Is that how they did it? Is that how they do it? I love that. I just thought, oh my God, that is so British. It is so clever and full of irony. I'm really surprised that he doesn't love this movie. I mean, I maybe he didn't get certain things he wanted, but it's so great. The first thing he says to Truffaut is, well, I don't have much to say about this.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the biggest thing he got out of it was Grace Kelly. That was
Probably.
the first. Yeah. She's mousy in the film. She's not as glamorous, as she was going to be in Rear Window or To Catch a...
Yeah, that's true. I know that I believe originally he wanted Cary Grant and Olivia I can never say her name. De Havilland, is it? No.
Yeah.
He wanted them. I think that would have been interesting with Cary Grant, but I think Ray Milland had the right amounts of charm and also the right amount of edge and the right amount of there's something seedy about this guy. I mean, Cary Grant, to me, I love Cary Grant, but he doesn't have a seedy quality, at least to me. What did you think of the casting here?
No, I agree, because even like in Suspicion, he plays a kind of a seedy guy.
That's right.
You never quite buy it. You're watching Cary Grant. And Ray Milland, you can kind of, I don't know, you can kind of smell the scuffs on his shoe leather and I'd watch Cary Grant, I'd watch him play anything by Olivia de Havilland. But,
that's right.
I think Ray Milland really, he kind of has that sort of clammy.
He was perfect for it. Yeah.
I love his work, and Olivia de Havilland could have rocked it, but I'm really glad that it kind of brought Hitch and Grace Kelly together. And
I agree.
And it was an interesting, transition piece in her work, moving from kind of a little bit more plain Jane roles. But in this one, she's a little sexier. And, so in a Hitchcock film, it's the casting is always so interesting. And it's hard to imagine a movie where you can think that anybody else could have done the role. And because the people that he picked, or the movie, the final product makes the actors look like they were predestined from birth. Yeah. Been in that role. And
I agree. I honestly can't even imagine anyone else, because just their expressions, everything, it just fit like a glove. I mean, I haven't even seen Anthony Dawson in anything else, who played Charles, the guy he blackmails into killing, he attempts to kill his wife, and just the way in which he reacts when he starts to see what Ray Milland is getting at is so responsive and expressive. He actually reminded me of Adrian Brody to an extent. He has this sort of
kind of hatchety look to his face.
Yes, and truly distinctive look. I thought he was excellent. And Robert Cummings, who of course was in Saboteur. And it's funny because I'm sure, as you know, Hitchcock always felt that Cummings didn't have much expression in his face, but then he picks him to play a guy who's going through so much turmoil. Here he is, the woman he's in love with is about to be killed. I mean, that's not just someone who can't bring that to life. You really need a good actor, but for whatever reason he picked him, and I thought he was really good. I thought he was great. John Williams, the inspector, he was perfect.
Oh, John Williams. Was that his first project with John Williams? It might have been. I'll have to look that up. But of course, he plays the insurance inspector in To Catch a Thief.
Yes.
And then he played in several Hitchcock Presents episodes.
I didn't know that.
And almost always, except for one of the TV episodes, but he always plays an inspector, or
he's perfect for it.
He has this sort of, yes, I know the law and I shall enforce the law, but I'm really subject to a higher law that I know when to break the rules and when to bend the rules.
Which is what he does. I mean, I love that he basically breaks the law, and he has no warrant or any reason to go, other than a suspicion, to go into Ray Milland's apartment. And I forget the exact line, but he's like, I was really fired up or something.
Yeah. My blood was up.
Yeah, I love that. But yeah, you're right. He was in a lot of the Alfred Hitchcock series, and he did it on Broadway as well, the play.
Right. Here's a funny coincidence. So the character of the inspector in Dial M for Murder became an icon. Of course, he himself is sort of modeled on this very Sherlock Holmesian intellectual, sleuth who sees the details that nobody else sees. And so that's more than an icon. I think it's more of an archetype, and at this point. But so Dial M for Murder was performed on Broadway. Then a couple of writers took that character and resurrected him under a different name. He was like the source inspiration for a short story that appeared in Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine.
Oh.
And that character turned out to be so popular that they created a play out of him. And eventually that character became Columbo on TV.
Oh, no way. I didn't know that.
So you got the guy who seems a little bit kind of spacey, a little kind of daft, but he sees everything. You got the overcoat.
That's Columbo right there.
Yeah. And so you could almost say that there would be no Dial M for Columbo if there hadn't been a Dial M for Murder. So that's kind of how
that's interesting.
It weaves out there, right?
Oh, I never put that together. It's now it is so obvious. I'm surprised it didn't pop out to me as you described it.
It's like so obvious. And
maybe because it's British versus Columbo, who's so American, so Peter Falk, New Yorker, that it's hard. But actually, really, if you look at those parts, they're very similar. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Funny.
Another thing I notice is that for me anyways, and this again is classic Hitchcock, is there's not necessarily the good people and the bad people. There's more of a gray, because Grace Kelly and Robert Cummings, I mean, at the end of the day, they're not bad people, but they're, she's committing adultery, she's having an affair, and Robert Montgomery knows she's married, and they're hanging out with Ray Milland at the same time. I mean, they're doing this right in front of his face. I mean, Ray Milland is a total evil person, but there is that moment when he's on the phone and he hears Grace Kelly about to be murdered as she's being strangled, and he starts to look like he's not necessarily doubting it, but he's having a hard time hearing it. Like, once the reality hits in, I wonder if that just came from Milland, that he thought that would be an interesting choice, or if that was something Hitchcock wanted. Well, I mean, whether or not he chose to use it in the editing room, so he must have liked it. But I really like that moment where he just looks like he's horrified by it. Did that ever stand out to you?
Yeah, it was. Absolutely. And I think that's, it's classic Hitchcock, that none of the victims are pure and innocent, and none of the villains are pure evil. That they're all human. They're all real people with beating hearts. And even like, you could kind of follow the movie through a thread that says, well, she deserved what she got because she was cheating on him. But she was also, she had actually broken off the relationship with Robert Cummings. So, come over, they're kissing, and then she's like, pushes him away, and she says, "It's over. We're not going to do this anymore." And he says, "Well, why?" And he says, "Well, because, her husband has been, Tony Wendis, there's been a change."
That's right. She did say that. Yeah.
And, I think our marriage is up on the upswing, and I kind of want this thing to be over. And so it's like, she's a little bit more noble than, we want to say. And Ray Milland's a little bit more, he turns out to be pretty heartless in the end, but we do have a kind of a touch of conscience there. In fact, you could even say that even, visually and symbolically, as things are starting to get, the noose is starting to tighten around him, we kind of see that he's starting to get he's falling apart a little bit. He has one encounter with the inspector, and as soon as the inspector walks out the door, he pours himself a tall drink and slams that back. He's moved that bed that was in the bedroom, he's moved that into the living room. Like, what the hell is that doing there?
Yeah.
And that seems to be, to my eye anyway, kind of a subtle hint that maybe he just can't sleep in the bedroom anymore.
Oh, gee, you see, there's another detail that I didn't even pick up. It's you have to see it so many times because I think I've seen it probably. Well, I watched it again the other night, so that would probably be my fourth at most. But I can watch it again tonight and probably, see so much more. It also plays on. And Hitchcock did this a lot, where because he's telling it largely from the point of view of Milland, and because the audience is hearing this whole plan, that I can't help but find myself going with him to be like, oh shit, you're gonna get caught, or this is not gonna go well. Oh, she got away, and then to really be going with Grace Kelly because of what happened now. Oh my gosh, she's being put to death. She had nothing to do with this. And so he's sort of playing with you on going with both sides, both the good and the bad. I mean, was that your experience ever?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You're kind of getting whiplashed around, you're rooting for, and again, that's classic Hitchcock.
This I got right away because it comes right out of the time, the moment when the inspector gives Grace Kelly's handbag back to one of the cops working with him, and he's holding it, just on his wrist, and the inspector says, "Oh God, what are you doing? You're going to get arrested if you're walking around." And I knew right away, because back then, of course, in the 50s, it was illegal to be homosexual. So I just thought obviously. It's unfortunate that they use that for a place of humor. But when we look at it now, I know exactly why, because yes, it was totally, illegal and forbidden. And if anyone who's seen Victim with Dirk Bogarde, that was my reference right away. I'm like, oh God,
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
Oh, no,
Oh,
I
it's
haven't.
great. Yeah. Well, it's all about how homosexuals were being blackmailed in London and how a lawyer does something about it. But
Mhm.
yeah, I that was a detail that really popped out to me. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hadn't quite caught the because it didn't necessarily come across to me as um, egregiously homophobic, but it
right.
just kind of strikes me as a fatal moment, something that is sort of like in on the joke, in on the gay humor. And that's just my take on
Yeah. No, that's what I thought.
it.
Was there something significant about the use of the lamps? They had objects often in between them, or was that just so it would really pop in the 3D? I don't know
That
if you know anything about that, but
Oh yeah. Well, again, there's Hitchcock didn't really talk about it, so we can only surmise what his thinking was. But it was definitely, something that was sort of inspired by the 3D, the demands of 3D, and like as an overarching principle. And he said this in interviews, but you kind of have to put two and two together. He did say that what he was trying to accomplish in Dial M for Murder was to privilege the audience by bringing them up on the stage so that they could, as if, walk around amongst the
yes,
actors,
right.
right? And so he would have done that even if he shot it flat, I think. But he used the 3D, imaging to sort of really give you that presence. And so there are several moments in the film where you really feel like you're standing shoulder to shoulder with the characters and
Yes,
eavesdropping on their conversation. But then there are other limitations to 3D. So when you stop and think about it, 3D only works on the forward Z axis. In other words, if somebody throws a baseball at you in 3D, you'll duck because you'll feel like it's coming at you. But if somebody throws that ball, down the hallway away from you, it's gonna just look as flat as any other film.
right.
And so that's one of the overlooked limitations of 3D cinema. So when you kind of think that through, what that means then is, in the theatrical sense, you can, the actors can step into the audience, but unless you're moving that camera around, the audience can't really like go on stage. And so there's even with that's a limitation. And so you see all these symbols of barriers in the film, and they act as fences sort of separating us from the characters.
Yeah.
So in some scenes, you kind of have these really chummy, eavesdroppy, very intimate scenes where you feel like we're on stage. But then there's that one famous shot of the row of bottles where, we really feel sort of like shut out. And that's repeated, like, so that bed in the living room, the bed frame acts as a fencing device.
Right.
It's kind of a recurring, a recurring motif that, to my mind, signals a sort of separating that's going on.
That's what I thought, because I had imagined it was also that the distance with the characters as well, like Milland being separate from Robert Cummings and Grace Kelly. I thought he was putting it there to say that, like you had said, a fencing. But then when he talks about the fact that he like made a pit for the camera so he can go low, any idea what the purpose of that was?
Well,
Was
I
that
think
also for the 3D to work better?
Yeah, I mean, well, it was the only way he could get that shot in 3D, because the 3D cameras were huge. So that
I
means
see.
he had to build the stage up and then put a hole in it so that the camera could fit. And so, like diegetically, that low angle shot of Milland is just like placing him in a position of power, right? That's like,
Right. Yeah.
There are other things, like it's one of his single set films.
Right.
And so almost the entire story takes place basically in one room, and so he had to constantly be looking for new angles, to shoot it from, just to keep it visually interesting. And so there's that. But then the other thing that he did, this goes right back to his silent film era training, is like every object every prop in the movie is a character. It's not just a prop. And so, with these really weird low angle shots, and he did a matching or a corollary shot that's like a fly on the wall way above the ceiling.
Yes. Yeah.
And you see the chandelier below you. It's just a beautiful shot.
Yeah. When he's really telling the guy how to come in, hide behind the curtain. I was wondering about that as well. I felt like, again, it gave that feeling of the audience as the eavesdropper. That's the way I kind of looked at it.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, and so all these pieces, they come alive. So you got the lamps, and I think the lamps almost in a way stand in for an observing, enlightened, observer. You can personify them all you want. So these props, they just sort of they kind of have a life of their own. And I think he was, whether he's successful with that or not, I think he was experimenting with how do these modeled objects, these 3D objects, occupy the frame, and then how do they sort of come alive or comment on the action in a sense, because I don't think he would have just done things randomly for the sake of the 3D. He would have made a point. Yeah.
The kind of director he was. I mean, that's a really interesting observation about the objects having lives of their own, because then of course you got the rope, you've got the scissors, you've got the stockings, you've got the key, everything. I know that's so interesting. I never actually, the phone, everything is so part of the plan and part of the story. That's so true. And
yeah, it's like Beauty and the Beast, the singing teapots,
Yeah. When Ray Milland comes back and he sees everybody in the apartment, he sees that, the key doesn't work, and then he checks under the mat and that one works. You as the audience are like, oh yeah, you've been found out. But then I thought, could he have processed it that quickly? It's another one of those, because I would have been like, hang about. I don't know if I would have been able to put that again, but I never doubt it. I wonder if the audience, or at least myself, doesn't doubt it, because I already know all that, and I'm just waiting for him to get nailed at that point. And he basically does. I mean, the audience is not going to start thinking in terms of what he's thinking, because they just assume he also in that moment figures it out, and they all have that collective drink. Anyone want to drink? It's like a goodbye.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
It's even kind of interesting to put these little plot holes in there, because it gives people something to talk about after the movie is over.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you could almost argue that it's there by design. Malcolm Gladwell, the writer, the New Yorker writer. So he writes these articles, and there are these think pieces, or there are these stories about, news events and things, and he has a theory about what these all mean. But his theories, a lot of times, they seem sort of like half-baked or kind of half-cracked or something. And he insists that that's by design, because if people can argue about it and argue with him, so to speak, and disagree with what he's saying, then you've got, that's interesting. That makes it interesting. But if
it enriches the experience.
Yeah, if everything is buttoned down and perfected, then you don't have anything to go, what was that all about? So.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And his films are full of those kinds of moments. Since you saw it in 3D, was it a much better experience to have seen it that way, or does it?
Oh, it is. It's actually on Blu-ray, 3D Blu-ray.
Oh, wow. So you can get, wow, that's amazing.
It is amazing. And so Blu-ray 3D glasses, they're battery operated, and
do they give you the glasses? Or do you gotta get them?
You gotta buy them. They're not cheap, but the 3D experience is absolutely laser sharp.
Oh man,
perfect. Like, you watch this Blu-ray and you'll see it in better resolution than Hitchcock himself saw it.
Wow. Don't tempt me.
And so, you or your viewers, get it. Go to your favorite place to get the 3D Blu-ray. And And so, yeah, there are all kinds of things. So like the big bravura 3D moment, of course, is during the murder scene, and she seems to be reaching out to the audience as if imploring the audience to come to her rescue. And he repeated that shot, of course, in Psycho when Marion reaches for the shower curtain.
Oh, yes. Right.
And but that's not the only like shot that is sort of, I mean, arguably every single shot, every single frame in that movie is staged with the 3D effects in mind. But there's another one, and it's a very, very quiet moment, and it's right when this inspector starts to suspect that, you know, that she's a bad one,
right?
And he's questioning her, and so you see Tony Windus and the inspector kind of here, and then she's isolated in her own piece of the frame over here, and you know, he's interrogating her, and it's very much us versus her. And then he's like, well, what about the key? And so she pulls the key out, and and we see her arm in the frame coming up from below holding this key out, and it's just this little tiny hand holding this key. And unlike most bravura 3D shots that are very powerful and impactful, and you're getting hit in the face with, you know, boulders or whatever,
yeah,
it actually emphasizes her weakness and smallness and vulnerability. It's just a beautiful moment that just goes by very quickly.
Wow. So it's quite the enhanced experience, I imagine. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wow. I mean, the only thing I have to compare it to is when I saw Scorsese's 3D movie Hugo.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think I ever saw it again after that in the 2D. But I mean, that was just such an experience. So I'm sure that this is equally, if not a better one.
Yeah, it's interesting. So that Hugo is, of course, kind of obsessed with mechanics and clockworks and the little automatons and everything.
Right.
And so you can almost see, you know, a corollary between the obsession in that film and this sort of obsession with telephony and mechanics and the mechanics of the plot and Dial M for Murder. So I think there's a lot more in common between.
Oh, probably. I'm sure he was looking at this. Scorsese,
he says that Dial M was the best 3D movie ever made.
Well, this is on, if people want to stream it, I know you can see it on Canopy. You can see it on free there. And it's a film that, like I said, you can watch again and again. And it's so much fun. It's so detailed, so engaging. And it's so beautiful to look at as well. I mean, I just wish the world looked like that in a way. And as Joel is saying, I mean, the 3D version looks like it's just enhances the experience that's that much more. So if you get it on Blu-ray, and then the 3D glasses on top of it. yeah, do it. It's so well worth it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Joel, thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on and as a guest to keep talking about Hitchcock films. I've enjoyed each and every one. I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate it. So thanks so much.
My pleasure. Yeah,
and look forward to the HitchCon, the conference. Again, it's October 1st to the 3rd, and you get the discount code 10% off, HitchCon 10, and I'll leave the discount code with the link in the description box below. Now on my Patreon membership, I have a Hitchcock tier, so I have a whole tier dedicated to different Hitchcock content I'll be making month in and month out, and the link to my Patreon is in the description box below as well. And for those of you here on my channel for the first time, please consider subscribing. You will see the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo floating above my head right here to your top left. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new videos or when I go live. Thanks so much, everyone, and I will see you in the next video.
Thanks for having me.